Welcome to Phillip Island, Victoria in Australia. What a setting we have for this great sporting contest, the Little Penguin Sea to Dune race. Nervous moments always as they gather on the beach, the tension mounting, and away they go. There's the defending champion, wearing his familiar navy blue and white, great waddling style. Another pre-race favourite though, losing touch with the pack. Maybe that's why. A few too many fish in the day's feeding. There's a familiar face, Skip McIntyre, 8 times a champion back in the 90s, a very successful coach now, keeping a keen eye on proceedings. This the leading group, 1 or 2 still able to put on a show for the camera, others just ploughing straight over it. Some resorting to shortcuts. Sad that cheating has crept into this beautiful sport. The judges will have a look at that. But up at the front, the pace is relentless, closing in on those sand dunes that will offer a bed for the night. The fatigue starting to tell. Who's got the finishing kick up on the outside? What a turn of pace from that one, whichever one it is. No answer from the rest, and he takes victory. What a win. There we are, into the burrow, building an extension with his winnings, and back tomorrow to try and defend his title here on Phillip Island.
Welcome to Live Penguin TV. My name is Megan and I'm going to be your host tonight as we watch the world's smallest species of penguin, our little penguins coming out of the water, crossing their beach and making their way back to their burrows here on Phillip Island in Victoria, Australia. And tonight I'm joined by Rolly. Do you want to roll on in and tell us what you'll be doing tonight?
Sure do. Hi everyone. Nice to see you all again. Nice to be seen. Looking forward to a really good night tonight. Penguins won't be too far away. I wouldn't have thought. It's starting to get a bit darker out there. As per usual, I'll be looking at your comments on Facebook, on YouTube, trying to get through a few of your questions, and of course looking at your guesses for penguin numbers last night. Now, we're going to keep you on tenterhooks for a little while, so we want to see some guesses come through, so look forward to seeing what they are.
Great, thanks Rolly. So send through all your guesses. If you were watching last night, how many penguins do you think came in? Join our little penguin lotto, see who can get the closest. And send through all your questions as well, and we'll do our best to get to a few of those questions live on Penguin TV tonight. Now, we are looking out over Summerland's beach, and I might even do a little bit of a scroll along the beach. We're looking out over Pyramid Rock, Cape Woolamai out there in the distance, and we are here on Phillip Island, which is also known as Milau. And that is the traditional name given to Phillip Island by the Bunurong. And they were the first people here on Milau. And they've been coming here for thousands of years before European settlement. They would come here in spring and summer to feed on things like short-tailed shearwater birds and shellfish all around the island. And they cared for this beautiful country for many, many, many years. So I would just like to acknowledge the Bunurong and their elders past, present and emerging, any traditional custodians, any First Nations people who might be watching tonight, and acknowledge any lands that you all might be watching us from as well. And do let us know in the comments where you are watching from tonight. And we are looking out over Bass Strait as well, waiting for our first group of penguins to arrive. And I think I might see the first one. We are looking out to the south as well, so about 3,800 kilometres out in front of us, there is actually Antarctica, where we get our big species of penguins, like our big emperor penguins, which people might have seen at the aquarium. very different to our little penguins here. We can look out to where the biggest species live, but here we only have the little penguins who only grow to be about 1 foot tall, about the length of a school ruler, about 33 centimeters, and they only weigh about 1 kilo. And this one in particular looks very small because he's all by himself. Where are your friends? Normally we won't see our first penguin coming all by themselves, so that's probably why he's gone back out into the water to wait for a few other penguins to cross with. And they do form groups called rafts when they're out at sea, and the penguins that we see coming in tonight, they might have been out at sea for a few days, a few weeks, maybe even a month, looking for food, diving up and down all day, looking for small fish, things like pilchards, anchovies, a bit of jellyfish and squid, diving usually over 1,000 times each day. But when they decide they want to come back up onto land, they'll start forming these groups a couple of hours before sunset. So we might be able to see some rafts out there in the water. They look kind of like a black line on the surface. So your screen at home might be a bit bigger than mine, so let us know if you can see any of those rafts. If you were sitting down here on the beach, and we do have some people down here at the Penguin Parade tonight from regional Victoria, which is fantastic to have people back out on the stands again, and we do hope to see everyone back out here as soon as you're able to come and visit us. But if you were here and you were looking out, looking for those rafts, sometimes you might even hear them before you see them as they're coming in. And they make a noise that we call a huck. So they'll be going, huck, 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 huck. You're not going to huck for me, Rolly?
Oh, sorry, I was so busy looking at these questions coming through and
That's
these
okay,
guesses
I'll
moving on in
forgive
a
you.
world of my own.
They will huck and they'll call out, and usually they'll get a response from the other penguins nearby. They'll group together and they'll sit on the surface of the water looking out onto the horizon, waiting for it to get dark. Because when it gets dark is when it is safest for them to cross the beach. Because they are so small, they're worried about big birds of prey. Things like sea eagles, Pacific gulls, swamp harriers, they might want to make a penguin into a snack. So that's why this little penguin isn't crossing by himself. He's going to wait for a group, so he has that safety in numbers, and maybe wait till it gets a little bit darker to make sure that all of those big birds of prey have gone to roost for the night before he comes out of the water. And we do need at least 5 penguins to officially start our penguin count for tonight. So we do have, do you know who we have counting tonight, Rolly?
I haven't actually heard who's got
No,
who's
well, we'll
counting
let you know
tonight.
when we hear who is counting the penguins, but they have a very difficult job. They'll be looking out there with their binoculars right now, waiting for the first 5 penguins to cross the beach to start our official penguin count that goes for 50 minutes. And that count has been going since 1968. So it is one of the longest running bird studies in Australia. And if you were watching last night, I hope you've got all your guesses in, because I'm going to get Rolly to give us a magic number. How many penguins did we have last night?
Well, we've got, I've got to tell you, I'm noticing a disturbing trend with some of the guesses here, Megan.
Yes.
Numbers between 1 and 999. We don't take ranges. I want a
An
3 or
exact
4
number.
digit number.
Yeah.
So, Emma wins the virtual chocolate tonight with her guess of 724.
Well
was
done, Emma.
closest to the last night's numbers of 713 penguins that arrived at 6:15 on the dot.
713 penguins. Beautiful. And 6:15, so they're a bit late tonight. Where are our penguins? They don't have little penguin watches, so I can't hold them to any particular time that they're going to come in. This penguin knows that it's time to come in, but where are all of your friends? They like to keep us waiting, these little penguins. They are wild animals, so they kind of do whatever they want. When they come in, it's up to them. It is when they feel safe crossing the beach. It is the most dangerous part of their day, like I said. So we want them to feel nice and safe before they cross the beach. Tonight there's quite a high tide, so I don't expect they're going to be too late. And there are a range of things that contribute to when the penguins decide to come out. Of course, the timing of sunset. Oh, this penguin might decide to cross by himself. I think he's getting sick of waiting. So the penguins do come in later and later as the sunset starts to be later. And the cloud cover. So it is quite cloudy tonight. Not as much as it has been earlier in the week. No, he's gone back in the water. So if it's a bit cloudier, then it gets darker a bit earlier and they might come in early. And also they tend to feel a lot more confident when the tide is higher, because crossing the sand is when they're most vulnerable. It's when they are the most conspicuous and easy to see for any predators that might be out there hunting. So when the tide is high, there's a lot shorter distance where they have to worry about being attacked by anything scary. So they're usually a bit more bolder, coming up to the edge of the water and running straight across, which is great for us, but it does make it a bit harder for our penguin counter, trying to count them all along this tiny little stretch of beach where sometimes they can have 50 meters of penguins forming a nice orderly line and crossing the beach. So let's keep our eyes peeled. Usually we do get the first group down here at Penguins Plus, where we are watching from with our camera tonight, but there are 5 pathways all along our beach here. So this one pathway does get the biggest groups of penguins, but there are 2 more pathways down here to the left between where our camera is and our first main viewing stand. There is another little penguin pathway up between our main stands you can see up here, and another one to the far left of the stands where our penguin colony actually ends all the way down there, past our viewing stands down that way. But we do get big groups up here where we're watching, because to the right of our camera is where most of our penguins live. Down here at the Penguin Parade, it's only about 10% of our penguin colony. But up along the Sutherland Peninsula, about 3 kilometres up to our right, we have about 32,000 little penguins. And that is all penguins living on Crown land, protected by Phillip Island Nature Park. So that's who we work for, and who's bringing you the live Penguin TV tonight. And Phillip Island Nature Parks doesn't just look after penguins. We do manage over 20% of Phillip Island. So we do manage the Koala Conservation Reserve, Churchill Island Heritage Farm, the Nobby's Antarctic Journey, and many of our beautiful beaches, wetlands and woodlands, including that entire southern coastline, from Seal Rocks to Cape Woolamai, all the way along that coast. We do help look after that area as well. So when you are able to come visit us, we are a visitor-funded conservation organisation. So buying a ticket to any of those places, buying a souvenir or food and drink from Phillip Island Nature Parks, that money does go right back into conservation, education and research for our beautiful wildlife, our penguins, our geese, our bandicoots, our koalas, you name it. There's many, many more. You can help us look after them when you're able to visit. Otherwise, you can help out by donating to the Penguin Foundation. And the donations from the Penguin Foundation do go back into that conservation and research and education work that we do. And I think someone just realised that they hadn't turned a light on.
I heard on the radio, it's looking awful dark out there.
It just got a lot brighter. Oh, maybe the penguins couldn't see the light and they were like, where is our pathway? And it's quite flat tonight, so I'm surprised we haven't been able to see any rafts. But again, you guys might be able to see them. I'm looking at quite a little screen. We'll keep our eyes peeled, and while we're looking, we might get some questions.
Sure, we've got stacks and stacks already, Megan.
Beautiful.
I might start with a couple of the kids' questions, I reckon. Lucinda and Matilda would like to know, how far do penguins travel for food?
Oh, that's a great question. How far do they travel for food? So it really depends on the time of the year. So right now in winter, the penguins do travel a bit further. They can be out there for a week or a month looking for food, because food is a little bit further away. And they can spend longer out at sea because they don't have any babies to come back and feed. So they can be going hundreds of kilometres. They can go all the way up to the kind of the South Australian border. There's a big upwelling of nutrients up there at the Bonnie upwelling. They like to go down that way. Ooh, I think that one penguin might have made his way up onto land. So they can go quite far when they're spending all that time out at sea. But when they are breeding, they have to come back sometimes almost every day when they have older demanding chicks who need lots of food. They might be doing short one-day trips, and they might be going up to about 30 kilometres is how far they might like to go during the breeding season. So not too far. A lot of them will forage just out around Cape Woolamai that we could see out out at the end of the peninsula there. And a lot of them might go up around to Wilson's Prom. For anyone in Victoria who might know where Wilson's Prom is, it is the most southern end of mainland Australia. So the penguins will forage around there, and they don't go too far during that breeding season. One breeding season, the food was a little bit further away, and they were having to go up to about 80 kilometres that year. And that meant that they didn't do so well raising babies, because they... instead of coming back with less food, the penguins, they tend to just spend longer out there until they have a nice big meal to bring back for their chicks. And here's a nice group of penguins. About time, guys. Where were you? So I think this should be plenty of penguins to start our official penguin count for tonight. So if you want to try and help out our penguin counter, test out your skills, you can have a bit of a go at counting this group as they cross the beach. We do like to call them a raft in the water. When they come up onto land, my favourite term for a group of penguins is a waddle, because I'm sure you've noticed, they have that funny little walk about them, because they can't really bend their knees, so their knees are kind of stuck in a little squat position. So to move, they just kind of have to lean forward, rock side to side, and get a bit of momentum, and they get going, which can make them look a little bit awkward and clumsy, but it actually gives them quite a low center of gravity, which means they're quite good little climbers. You can see them clambering up over the rocks there, and they can jump about their own body height. They can jump pretty high to get up over the rocks, get up onto land nice and safely. And you can see once we had a nice big group, they didn't waste any time crossing that little bit of beach that they had to get across there. So that'd definitely be a start to our official penguin count. Pop in your guesses in the comments how many you think came in that group. And we still have the pool, which is great. I love watching them come over and do a bit of a swim through the little swimming pool here that we tend to get after we've had a bit of rain. And I think this is probably my favourite depth, when it's not quite deep enough for them to swim. So they can't quite decide whether they want to walk through or they want to swim through, and they kind of do a bit of both, a bit of flapping their flippers but pushing with their feet, and they just look maybe even more awkward than when they're just walking on land. But what they're made to do is be out in the water. They're little pocket rockets out there. They're shaped like little torpedoes. They can swim faster than the fastest human Olympic swimmer. They can go max speed about 12.5 kilometers per hour. So they're pretty quick when they're out at sea. And when they're on land, they're a bit more awkward, but they can actually go pretty quick. If you were to go and try and catch one, I don't think you'd have too much luck. And you certainly wouldn't want to try and do that either, because they are wild animals. They're protected, and they're also really feisty, and they would certainly bite you and or poop on you. Oh, and here comes a nice group around the Penguin Highway. I always struggle to keep up with them here. It is certainly a highway. They go nice and quick. Do you have a question for me, Rolly?
Oh, I've got stacks and stacks and stacks.
You look like you were ready to say
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for a minute there I actually misheard you. I wasn't sure if you said is a nice group or a nice poop coming along the Penguin Highway.
Look, there could be either, let's be honest.
That's right. So Edie, who is 6, wants to know if penguins mark their territory.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'm guessing you mean with maybe like scent, like a
dog
or a
might
bear.
do or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So something we actually didn't know for a long time is whether penguins use scent or smell. But we actually had a study it's probably quite a few years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that was funded by the Penguin Foundation, looking into penguins' use of smell. And something that our researchers found was that it doesn't really seem like penguins use their sense of smell on land. So they don't really use it to help them find their burrows. So I'm guessing that would mean they don't really use it to mark their burrows either. They do use their sense of smell when they're out at sea to help them find food. But when they're on land, they're mostly using their eyesight and their hearing and their memory. So what they do to kind of protect their burrows and their territory is the male penguins, they will, whenever they're home at their burrow, they'll stand around out the front all night defending it. So it's kind of more of an active approach to marking where their burrow is, rather than leaving the little scent marker. They'll just stand there and say, hey everyone, this is my burrow, steer clear. And if anyone gets a little bit too close, there might be a bit of and a bit of a peck and a fight. We've certainly seen penguins draw blood fighting over fighting over burrows and fighting over partners before. So they can get really feisty in defending their burrows. And penguins, they do tend to go back to a similar place each year to breed. So they do sometimes change burrows between seasons, but often they're coming back to the same place and burrows within a similar area. So usually they'll kind of know where they're going back to, they'll know where they want to make their burrow, and then I'd like to think that they maybe know who not to mess with. But if the young penguins coming back for the first time when they're about 2 to 3 years old, the young males coming back in might have a bit of a difficult time finding a burrow. They might have to dig a hole in the ground themselves or climb one of those wooden boxes that you might have seen around the place. And some of the ones down here that you'll see as I'm scrolling across are actually some of our research burrows that we do study. And there are a couple just down here to the right of the camera that I was checking on a couple years ago now. And we did have an instance where there was 2 penguins who claimed that burrow. They'd laid their eggs and hatched some cute little chicks in there. And the chicks had gotten to the age where they were over about that 4-week-old mark. They were cute and fluffy, but they were able to be left home alone by mum and dad. So they were in the burrow, and instead of mum or dad being home, they were out fishing, looking for food to feed the chicks. And then this other random male penguin started coming into the burrow. And we were like, oh, this is really strange. You're not the parent. What are you doing in here? And he was very grumpy and sticking to the other side of these chicks, and occasionally he'd give them a little bit of a peck, so he was quite mean. So we scanned his microchip, because the penguins that live in these little research burrows, and the burrow was, I'll come over here and see if I can find it. It is just over in the kind of in the vegetation behind where these penguins are here. The penguins in these research burrows, they do have a little microchip in the back of their neck, like what you might have in your pet cat or dog. So we can scan them, and we know who they are. So we scanned this imposter penguin, and we went back and downloaded the data and looked up this penguin's microchip number to see who he was and what he thought he was doing. And he was actually born in the burrow next door about 3 years earlier. And he'd come back and he decided, oh, I was born just here, so this burrow, this one here must be mine. And he'd gone in and he said, hey, what are you doing here? To the chicks, get out, this is my burrow. And he tried to claim it for himself. But he wasn't there for long. I'd expect that the dad penguin came home and kicked him out and said, no, it's not your burrow, go find somewhere else. These are my chicks and my burrow. And we only saw him a couple times and then we didn't see him again. So I hope he went off and found his own burrow. But they can be quite feisty and quite aggressive in claiming and defending some of their burrows, these little penguins. Well, we do also have a wallaby up here on the hill, just having a bit of a munch on some grass, watching the penguins as they go by. And I'll go back down to the beach. And our wallabies and penguins, they tend to just tolerate each other, just like the geese and the penguins. Sometimes they might have a bit of a run-in. You guys may have been watching one night, if you're one of our regular watchers, when a curious little penguin went to investigate what a wallaby was doing and bit the wallaby's tail, which wasn't very nice. But I've also seen a wallaby just hopping along and accidentally hopped on a penguin's head, and the penguin was fine. So it's quite funny watching our wildlife move around, navigate each other, and see how they interact. Do we have another question?
Sure.
Or group numbers or anything?
Yeah, what do you want first?
What have you got?
It all. So I've got like a question and an answer really at the same time, because you kind of just answered it, but I wanted to acknowledge that Olivia, who is 5, asked if penguins bite. And as you were just talking about how feisty they can get defending their burrows or trying to claim a burrow, yeah, they sure do, don't they? And I'm sure you've got the odd scar to prove it too.
Yes, they definitely bite, and they bite very hard. I've had my war wounds because I've done a bit of work with our research team. We don't handle penguins unless absolutely necessary for research or if they are sick or injured, so we can take them to the wildlife clinic. I think one of the biggest tests of a sick or injured penguin is if you think it looks a bit off and maybe there's something wrong with it, and you go to pick it up and it turns around and does that and gives you a bite, and it flaps its flippers really hard against you because they have really strong flippers as well as having a really strong beak. It really hurts, and usually, if they're quite feisty, they're usually pretty okay. And then, some are a bit more feisty than others. So I've certainly checked the same site over and over and over again and gotten to know which penguins I really didn't want to mess with. There was actually last year, here's another group. I was working on a penguin tracking program. We were putting little GPS trackers on the backs of penguins, letting them go out on a foraging trip and waiting for them to come back to get the trackers off. And there was this one burrow, and I knew that the male was really feisty, so I put the tracker on his partner, but that meant that I had to come back out every night that she was out at sea to come check if she'd come back to take the tracker off. And every time I came out to check on the burrow, I think it was about 3 nights in a row, she hadn't come home, but he was there every night, and every night he chased me. And he chased after me and was biting at me and squawking at me. He was not a fan. Whereas some penguins, I would go out to remove the tracker and they just kind of look at me while I picked them up to take the tracker off. So they certainly bite, and some of them are a bit harder than others. Some of them have a bit more of an attitude. That's for sure.
Now, I've also had a question from Athena, which is, why are penguins called penguins? This is more a language question, I guess, than anything else. Have you got any theories, Megan?
I have had this question before, and I have looked up the answer, and I'm trying to remember it. I think it might have come from a word for some other seabird, like puffins. Do you know the answer?
Well, I know there are two theories, because no one knows for absolutely sure. But yes, so they're thinking the name might have originated when talking about what was called the Great Auk, which originated in around Newfoundland and Canada, which was like a giant version of the modern day puffins, etc., etc. Where you get penguins out of auk, I'm not entirely sure. They're not too similar. The other sort of popular theory is that it might have come from the Welsh words penguin, which is white head. But I'm not aware of too many penguins that have actually got white heads, which is quite interesting. So I'm not sure that I've got an answer for you, Athena, or that Megan and I have an answer for you. It's one of those mysteries of life, I think.
Yeah, it's certainly a very good question. Yeah, thanks for your answer, Rolly. I really wasn't sure, and I've definitely read those different things before. But I guess it just is what it is. They're penguins, and these ones are obviously little penguins because they are the smallest species of penguin, and their scientific name is actually Eudiptula minor, which means good little diver, which I think is quite cute. They are, as I was saying before, they're very good at that time they spend out at sea. They're very little, and these guys, we have recorded penguins diving down as deep as about 72 meters, so they are very good little divers. So I think at least their scientific name, which I do know where that comes from, it's a Latin one that means good little diver. That's certainly a very fitting little name. And we have had people asking in the comments over the last couple of nights why they're not called fairy penguins anymore, because fairy penguins, they are the same. Little penguin, little blue penguin, blue penguin. It is all this little species here, the little penguin that we have on Phillip Island, found along the southern coast of Australia and New Zealand. Oh, and there's more penguins on the highway. They're too quick for me. And we just, they made the change to little penguin to have a more to have one name kind of in the scientific community, and overall that was a little bit more accurate. It fit in with their scientific name, so it was nothing too sketchy. It was just changed to have kind of a more consistent naming of them as the little penguin, and I think it is quite fitting. If you look at these cute little guys, only a foot tall, certainly our smallest species of penguin. And they are so small here in Australia because it is a lot warmer. So penguins have to be smaller in warmer areas to help them stay cool. And of course you have the big penguins in places like Antarctica where it's really cold, and they have to be really big so that they can stay warm. And what are these penguins here doing? Whereas our little penguins, if they went to Antarctica, they'd get much too cold. And if those big emperor penguins were to come here to Australia, then they're going to get a little bit too warm and overheat. Unless, of course, they're in an aquarium where they have all that nice air conditioning. And let's see what's going on down here.
Now, it seems like so long ago, I mean, when the first group came in at 624, but there were 118 of them, just in case anyone wanted to know.
Thank you. 118. I'm sure everyone had lots of wonderful guesses.
They were all in the 70s and 90s, so... And
maybe not so good guesses, guys. Come on.
That's right, exactly. Up your game, come on. Although that said, I do know now that Tom is counting tonight, and we have called Tom an optimistic counter in the past, so.
That is true. You guys all know Tom, who sometimes produces here on Penguin TV, and he is an optimistic counter. I think he's
glass half full kind of guy. What can I say?
No, it's good. We need that bit of optimism. I know for those of you who watch regularly, Stephen, in our Penguin Lotto, he always guesses probably about 1,000 penguins more than everybody else. So if we have an unusually good night of penguin numbers, Stephen's always the one who wins the Penguin Lotto and gets the chocolate.
And it's interesting, Megan, I suppose I wanted to make a comment as well about the penguin counting and the penguin numbers. In as much as, let's say, we're saying there were 713 penguins last night, and the reality is it probably doesn't really matter whether there were 713 or 729 or 701. It's really just a great indication of where the colony is at, how many are coming in the big picture. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 less, 10 more in reality. We know there's going to be a little bit of a margin for error. It's about getting to the big picture idea of what's happening in the colony.
Yeah, certainly. And it has, and that's why we still just have a ranger with a pair of binoculars. We don't use a more high-tech method because it is just having, that consistent, if we have error, it's consistent amount of error. Every night it's a ranger just counting. There's human error involved, but we just want that broad number that we can compare over years and years and years. So it's not about the difference night to night. It's about those overall trends about what's going on in the colony, so that we can make informed decisions. And that fits in with all of the other research work that we do, like the burrow checks that I was talking about, so seeing what they're doing on land, the penguin tracking that I mentioned as well, seeing what they're doing out at sea, and then seeing what they're doing crossing the beach, because they're the three main things that penguins are doing. Either they're on land, they're in the water, or they're coming in across the beach. So it's really important we combine all of that knowledge to get an overall picture of what the penguins are doing. And the penguin count, we'll keep some more on the highway. The penguin count was actually kind of the first indicator that something was wrong in our penguin colony back in the 80s, when our penguin numbers were declining. Those numbers crossing the beach were starting to drop, and that was kind of the first indicator that our researchers went, oh, this is no good. There's less and less penguins coming in. Maybe we need to do something. And then they were able to convince the government at the time that action needed to be taken to help protect our penguins, and that's how the Penguin Protection Plan started. That's how we managed to get rid of all the houses in the penguin colony. So I'll switch back to the main camera. So those little guys making their way up the hill there, they can cross the road and the road can be closed off. And there's no cars driving around up along the peninsula, so the penguins aren't going to get run over. They can go up without any lights or cats or pet cats or pet dogs up there. They can make their way home safely, and they have all of that peninsula to make their burrows. They don't have to compete with houses. They don't have to compete with roads. And they don't have to look out for foxes either, because part of that Penguin Protection Plan was the eradication of foxes on Phillip Island. So the penguin count, giving us that data, that indication of the penguin numbers, is along with our penguin survey that I was talking about the other night that we do to get a bit of a picture on, where the burrows are and how the penguin numbers are changing. It all tells us a big picture so we can see what things are affecting the penguins and how we can mitigate any of those threats that might be threatening our little penguins or our other wildlife here on Phillip Island. And one of the things that we've started to see that we've done a great job protecting our penguins here on land, and the next big thing is trying to protect them a little bit better out at sea, which is why we're doing kind of that tracking work, looking a bit more at feeding hotspots, so we can do things like potentially look at different fishing routes or different types of fish the penguins are eating by looking at their poo to see what's in there. We love looking at poo to learn a bit more about our wildlife. So we can work on protecting their food sources, and then also seeing if things like marine debris are being a bit of a problem, which it certainly is when they're out at sea. I mentioned before they use their sense of smell to find food, and a piece of plastic that's been out at sea for quite a long time starts to smell like fish and is often eaten by little penguins. So that's some of those next big things that we're working on, and that hopefully some of our research can inform us on to try and do better for our little penguins. And there is actually a talk on tomorrow at 1 o'clock, live streaming, just like our live Penguin TV on Facebook. If you want to learn a bit more about how climate change is affecting our wildlife, Lauren, a PhD student, and Professor Penguin, Dr. Andre, and Dr. Beck will be talking about penguins and seals in our wildlife and how climate change is affecting them. So if you're interested in all of that, I'd recommend tuning into our Facebook page for that live stream at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And that's for National Science Week, which you all know I love chatting about science, and I think I've got a few sciencey things in tonight as well as the other night. So maybe...
I was just thinking, Megan, what a sciencey answer you gave to that question. Well, I didn't even really ask the question about the penguin numbers. You gave us a wonderfully thorough sciencey response in honour of National Science Week. So well done, you.
Look, I probably would have done it whether it was Science Week or not.
This is true. Now, I have got a couple of questions for you. They're separate questions, but related to the same kind of period of time. So during the penguins' catastrophic molt, 2 questions. Do the penguins drink water while they're on land? And is their skin exposed at any time during the molt? So, for instance, do they drop all their feathers all at once and they just sit there naked and freezing for a while?
Oh, that's a funny picture. No, that's a very interesting question. We around that time of year, it's around February, March, I think we've had some streams going on then. You may have seen some miserable molting penguins, and sorry, I'm going to get distracted for a moment and zoom in on these penguins who are doing a bit of a courtship dance. So when they're molting, sorry, I'm just trying to find a good penguin angle. When I was doing my honours project 6 years ago now, there was actually another girl who was studying penguins during their molt to see if they drank water. And I can't say I ever really found out what happened with her research, but I think anecdotally, we've definitely seen penguins during molt drinking water. Normally when they're out at sea looking for food, they just drink water as they're fishing. So they don't need to go out to try and find water to drink. But I think we've definitely seen them, having a bit of a drink, and especially when it gets quite hot, penguins during their molt are quite prone to heat stress. So we've certainly seen over some hot days during that molting period, when they're spending about 2 to 3 weeks on land, losing or replacing all their feathers, they can't eat, they can't get their water like they normally would. So we have seen them walking out to the water, potentially to get a bit of a drink, and sometimes we've even seen them have a bit of a swim to cool down, even though they're not really waterproof. They can't go very far, but they sometimes do go for a little bit of a dip to cool down. I think it was about 2019, we did have a big heat wave, and there was one night I remember coming out to the penguin parade, and we were setting up the beach, and penguins were just walking out to the water to cool down, all these molting penguins, and then that sun were coming back up, and our penguin counter was like, I don't know which penguins went this way, which ones are going back this way, and how many penguins have actually come out of the water and crossed the beach. And that was a bit of a heat stress event which I think Lauren might be talking a bit about that heat stress in penguins in the talk tomorrow. But I'll get back to answering the question. Yes, I believe they do drink water during molt, and no, they're never shivering little naked penguins. As much as that would be so funny to see, it wouldn't be too clever for the penguins. They are already double their normal body size when they're molting because they can't eat for that few weeks. They're really chunky, and they are just digesting all of that food they already have, and their new feathers are actually coming through and pushing out their old feathers. So as the old feathers come out, they'll have new feathers pushing through underneath. So they are really hot and itchy, and they do struggle to maintain their body temperature as well. So I don't think they'd be too happy if they were sitting there naked. They might get a little bit cold. So they do have those new feathers coming through as the old feathers are falling out. But I have definitely seen some molting penguins where the old feather has fallen out a little bit before the new ones come all the way through, and they might have a little bald spot on their head or their back, but they do come through not all at once as well. So they either kind of look like a big puff ball, or they kind of have half of their new feathers, half of their old feathers, and then by the time they're done, they have all their beautiful new blue feathers, looking really sleek and really nice, ready to head out to sea. And it's really important, that changing of the feathers each year, because they are spending so long. They're spending that month out at sea in winter. They need to maintain those feathers and change them each year so that they can spend all that time out at sea being nice and waterproof. And I'm just going to look for some more penguins on the beach. There we go, there's another group. And that's another reason why I think another question we'd be getting a bit of is if you can tell if a penguin is really old. And because they've replaced their feathers each year, it's not really something you can tell. Like, they don't go grey, their feathers don't start to look old because they do replace them each year. So they kind of have a facelift each year when they replace their feathers, or a bit of a makeover, if you will. I'm not sure how long we have left. But
I was actually just going to say, Megan, in honour of the theme of the comments tonight, which was a very Star Wars based theme.
Oh, okay.
I was going to break into da 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 and say 5 minutes left, Megan.
Oh, perfect. Well, we might have time for maybe one or two more questions, depending on what you've got for me and how long I ramble on for.
So here's a really interesting one. It's actually one that I have wondered myself before.
Oh, okay.
If a penguin has to dig its own burrow, if it isn't able to move into one of our ready-made villas, can they dig it in a night?
Ah.
Is that something that we know, that we've ever actually looked at or studied?
Yeah, I don't think so. Not that I know of. Yeah, it's a very good question. I knew you'd try and stump me tonight.
It's Science Week after all.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't think they would be able to do it in one night. I have seen them, continuously doing a bit of renovation over time, but I don't think I've ever seen a penguin kind of start a burrow from scratch. I guess that would take a lot of dedication for a penguin, but they definitely must do it, because our penguin colony, in our last couple penguin surveys, as the numbers have increased to that 32,000 they are now, they've definitely moved further inland. So they've definitely made new burrows. But how long it takes them, sorry, I can't answer that. Maybe that's something I'll ask our research team and see if any of them know, but I suspect it may not be something that is very easy to measure. No,
and you just have to have like a researcher or a camera or something like that in the right place at the right time to capture that.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we're here night after night, and I would love if I saw a penguin start a burrow from scratch. Maybe I'll start making notes and come back and see how long it takes them. But yeah, it'd have to be very by chance that you would see that happening and maybe find out how long that takes them. And I would say that it might depend on the individual penguin as well and how motivated they are. It is the males that like to dig the burrow, that have most of the responsibility of digging the burrows, and certainly some are more motivated than others. We actually find in each penguin partnership there's usually one partner that's a little bit more lazy than the other, and one of them that brings back a bit more food and does more difficult foraging trips and goes a bit further and puts in a bit more work than the other one. And that's something, that Andre's seen in his research, is that there's usually a lazy penguin in each partnership.
That'd be me. Hands up. Yep.
Yeah, look, that'd probably be me as well. Yeah, if Dean's watching tonight, he'll attest to that.
Now, quick one. I hope Evie is still watching, because this question got asked a little while back, and I hope she's still awake. How long does a penguin egg take to hatch?
It takes about 35 days for a penguin egg to hatch. Just over a month for a penguin egg to hatch. Sometimes they do vary a little bit. Something really interesting actually about penguin eggs hatching is that sometimes because the partners take it in turns looking after their eggs, and I've already told you some can be a bit lazier than others, sometimes one diligent partner will be sitting on the nest waiting for their partner to come back from a foraging trip to swap over duties with them, and they might be taking forever. And if they take too long, sometimes that penguin sitting on the eggs, they just can't take it anymore. They're too hungry and they have to go out and look for food. And they might do that, and then their partner comes back, or they might come back in a day or a couple of days, and they'll go back to sit on the eggs, and the eggs can still hatch even if they've been left alone for a couple of days. You just take that time they were left alone where they weren't incubated and add that onto the end, and usually they'll just hatch a little bit later, which I think is amazing, that they can get cold and they're not being sat on. And sometimes they might not hatch, but most of the time you can just add that little bit of time they were left alone onto the end, and they might just hatch a little bit later, which I think is incredible that they're able to do that. All right, and I think we might be out of time.
I reckon we are out of time.
I'm not going to do a Jordan tonight. The Penguins already came in late.
We run a tight ship here.
Yes,
None of this
especially when
Jordan
Broly's
5 minutes
here. I
nonsense.
don't want to get in trouble. And the penguins have slowed down a bit. We do get most of our penguins in that first 30 minutes or so that's a prime penguin viewing time, and then it's time for the penguins to head back to their burrows and the rest of us to go home and have some dinner. And there's still people down there. They're super keen spending their time out there watching the penguins, so we're very happy we have regional Victorians back here at the Penguin Parade, and we hope to see everyone else back here as soon as possible. In the meantime, if you want to help us out with the work we do here at Phillip Island Nature Parks, you can help by donating to the Penguin Foundation. Adopt a penguin. Symbolically, of course, we've made them sound not too great at pets with all the biting and the pooping. So you can symbolically adopt a penguin. You can't yet adopt a ranger. I know Jordan promised that, but sorry, we're not up for grabs. But you can adopt a wallaby, a goose, a bandicoot. So that's a great way to help contribute to the work we do here. Tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock if you want to learn a bit more about how climate change is affecting some of our wildlife, our marine life here on Phillip Island. And have your guesses ready for tomorrow night as to how many penguins you think crossed the beach tonight. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Do you want to come in and say goodbye,
Love
Rolly?
to, absolutely.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye everyone.